Shalom, giving all praises, honor, and glory to our power, Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shah, Bahasham Rachak, Wadash, double honors to the apostles, the bishops, and the elders of Great Millstone. Peace and blessings to the whole elect of the tabernacles of David, scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, wherever you may be. Wherever you may be, Shalom, Mesherah, Shalom. All right, so we're going to get into Daniel, the 8th chapter. All right, it's actually a short chapter, pretty much straightforward. But first, we're going to read something here. It says the rise of the Persian Empire. So it says the Median Empire, all right, was the first Iranian dynasty established in modern Iraq. Now, because we know we spoke about or read about the Medo-Persian Empire, all right, from Daniel chapter 7, right, that Medo-Persian Empire. The Medes reigned first, and then the Persians came into power. I believe that was under Cyrus the Great, okay? I think it's Cyrus the Second or Cyrus the Great. I believe it's Cyrus the Great. But it says, it says established in modern Iraq and southeastern Anatolia, all right? So, which southeastern Anatolia is in an area of Turkey. It says, notoriously, the unreliable historian Herodotus writes a diocese as the founder of the empire around 715 BCE. However, it is more likely his grandson Cyaxares, right, conquered the Median tribes and formed them into the first kingdom, closer to 625. Herodotus writes about how Cyaxares led the Medians in revolt against the currently reigning Scythians, which we've all heard about the Scythians, right? Slaying their leadership after getting them drunk at a party. That sounds similar to what happened in the book of Maccabees, right? Almost call it the Maccabean dynasty, the Hasmonean dynasty. Okay, if you read that portion there, okay. But anyways, yeah, I mean it sounds exactly the same. Not saying these are the same people. I'm just saying it sounds exactly like the same account. But anyways, it says lost my spot. Okay, it says conquered the Median tribes and formed in the first year. Yep. Okay, so it says led the Medians in revolt against the currently reigning Scythians, slaying their leadership after getting them drunk at a party. After losing their power in the region, the Scythians retreated, but Medes later called them an ally. In 614, after reorganizing the military into a state structure with each soldier being provided by the government, he began expanding his borders and took the city Ashur, right? And we've all heard of Ashur-banipal, right? Banipal, however you want to pronounce it, right? So it says, 2 years later, in alliance with Babylon, his forces sacked Nineveh, and the victors split the region of the now destroyed Assyrian Empire. In 585 BCE, Cyaxares died, succeeded by his son Astyages, all right? And that was that Darius that we read about, remember? So it says, according to legend, Cyrus II, okay, yeah, here it is right here, Cyrus II, all right? According to legend, Cyrus II, also known as Cyrus the Great, yep, so I was right. So it says, was the grandson of Astyages. He was born in 580, all right? So it says here now, so you're not confused. It says in 585 BC, Cyaxares died, succeeded by his son Astyages, right? That is Darius, okay? Mede, okay? And it says, according to legend, Cyrus II, also known as Cyrus the Great, was the grandson of Astyages, okay? So it says he was born in 580 to a Persian king and a Mede princess, okay? So there's an intertwining marriage between the Medes and the Persians. It says, attaining the throne in 559. Cyrus still owed allegiance to his supposed grandfather, Astyages, as Media, to his supposed grandfather Astyages, as Media was the ruling kingdom. He led a revolt against the Medians, supposedly staging a coup during a party. Astyages was throwing and slaying many of his men while they were intoxicated or poisoned. Greek historian Ctesias disputes this familial claim, saying Cyrus II's birth was not noble and that he was at the party as a cupbearer before overthrowing Astyages. Over the next few years, he gathered an army and set about claiming the land of his overlords. All right. So I want to read that because we're going into over here to chapter As a matter of fact, let me jump to chapter 7 real quick. And yeah, it says, and behold, another beast, a second like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side. So raising up itself on one side, it wouldn't, no more known as the Medes, but Median Empire became known as the Persian Empire. And it says it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. Okay, that was those wars, Babylonia, Lydia, and Egypt. Okay, that were fought. Okay. It says, they said, thus unto it arise devour much flesh. After this I beheld, and lo, another, like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Now, as we already spoke about the last time, that was going into Alexander the Greek, okay, who came into power. Now, real quick, I'm going to go back here and pull up Cyrus. Let me see here. So there's not a bunch of... Okay. Okay. Let's just get... Well, actually, let's just read it all, small portion. Cyrus the Great was born around the time of 590 to 580 BCE. His father, Cambyses, was king of Persia, and his mother was a princess of the Achaemenid dynasty. He was likely born in Persia, which is modern-day Iran. Cyrus became the ruler of the First Persian Empire, or the Achaemenid Empire, right? Which will be discussed in a later section of this lesson. A definition for Cyrus the Great is the founder of this Achaemenid Empire and the Persian king from the approximate time frame of 559 BCE to 529 BCE. Cyrus the Great had a strong influence over the people he ruled, he helped shape the culture of the civilization of the Persian. So we really didn't have to read that anyways. So, all right, so let's go on and jump in here. Okay. So it says, vision of the ram and goat. So Daniel 8:1 says, in the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar. All right, remember we talked about Belshazzar. Chapter 6 was about Belshazzar, his coming into power. Well, actually not his coming into power, but I mean, I guess you could say that, but it's definitely taken out of power. Daniel chapter 7 and Daniel chapter 8 are visions, all right, of the future given to Daniel during the reign of Belshazzar, which you can read about Belshazzar in chapter 6. But here's the visions that were given to Daniel of the future in chapter 7 and chapter 8. Okay. So it says, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me, Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at the first. All right. So in other words, he's saying that this is not the first time I've had a vision. All right. I'm giving yet another vision. Right. And he's done that under even Nebuchadnezzar now, but you get the point, all right? So he's basically stating that, okay, this ain't the first vision I've had, and they're always heavy, okay? So it says, and I saw in a vision, and it came to pass, when I saw that I was at Shushan in the palace. Now, we talked about Shushan, all right, often, all right? It was, the winter palace for these kings, because there was the palace that they ruled from. Because Babylon is northwest from where Shushan will be. And I'm trying to see if I can pull it up. Shawashan, all right? Shushan or Susa. Here, the winter residence of the Persian kings located on the river Ulai or Chospes, all right? Which, as a matter of fact, let's just do this. I was going to light up Shushan, but let's light this up. Susa, the winter residence of the Persian kings, it stood in the district of Siscia of the province of Susania, Susiana, on the eastern bank of the river Chospes. Its name in Old Persian signifies lily, and that flower is said to abound in the plain in which the city stood. So, so you see the province of Elam right there, right? Susa. So now, if you're familiar with this area here, on the left you'll see down there where it says and Eric. That's the there's pointing right there. I didn't even see the arrow point, but here you go. The Euphrates River. All right. Now you see the one that's bridging off. Actually, it doesn't show it that well, but there's the Euphrates River. Then eventually bridging off from that is the Tigris River. So there's the Euphrates River. Okay, and so there's Babylon. So that's where they usually probably will reign from, right? Babylon. All right, or maybe somewhere else. But the point I'm trying to make is, in the wintertime, that's why it's called the Winter Palace. Excuse me, they will reign from Susa, because I guess the weather is just better, right, during the winter. All right, it's not as crispy. Okay, and so when you deal, and there's, you see the Chospes River is pointing out, it's not clear It's the best that we can see right now. But so this is where you would find often Daniel at, all right, by the river Susa. He would find himself, by there, getting peace, which that's very nice to do, all right. Getting some fresh air, going in the park or going down by a river, which I have both of those. I got the park and the river. So you like, if you ever hear me say I'm doing my Daniel thing, that's where I took it from, Daniel, all right, because I'll be down by the river, but it's refreshing, all right. River, trees, park, all right, it's nice, okay. So I'm not doing my Daniel thing right now. I'm actually in a truck. But yeah, you will find Daniel, you know, down here often, during near this river. All right, I believe it comes up again. If I'm correct, I might be wrong, but we'll get to it in another chapter. I believe in Daniel chapter 10, where it talks about the vision he saw of how it shine, so on and so forth. But yeah, you often find Daniel in this area here, and you see where it says Elam. All right, you see the Ch.8. Okay, it says what, the river Uli. All right, Ch.8, Uli, however you want to name it. Okay, so and then you see here. I'm glad that was there because there's a couple maps there. That's modern day what? Iran. Okay. So Daniel was captain of modern day Iran. That's why we spoke the last time we spoke about when Daniel was praying. He was most likely, when it says he was facing his window, he was facing northwest because Jerusalem is northwest from where he was stationed at, which is here in, Elam, all right, or modern day Iran, all right, around this area of Susa. Because remember, he was over a whole province. Okay. He went from the king's courts to just being over a whole province. If I'm correct, that's what happened there. So when Daniel would pray those 3 times a day, he was faced northwest towards Jerusalem, all right, praying to the Lord. But we have that general idea of these, areas, all right, because a lot of times, these scholars will make it hard for you to find that Uli River and, these things, but, we got them, right? So there you go, Shawashan. So that's where we're at right now, all right? That I was at Shushan in the palace, okay, the winter palace. So he was in the king's winter palace. Not saying it was winter, just saying that he was in the palace, all right? So it says, which is in the province of Elam, which is what? Modern day Iran. It says, and I saw in a vision, and I was by the river Uli, which is what? Also known as the Chospes, as we just saw on the map. So we mapped those things out for you. So you get in a clear picture of what we're dealing with here. And Elam in the Hebrew is Ayalam, all right? Ayalam, which means eternity, all right? Which you also hear uh I forget how it's pronounced now, but you get it. And but then here's a Ilam right there. I will lum you, right? That's a meaning forever and ever, all right? So let's go back. Let's keep going. So it says, then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before me the river before me the river a ram which had 2 horns. So he was in the palace. I guess he was probably, more than likely, he had to be on some open balcony, all right, just checking out the view, which that view, wherever he was in that palace, that view, he could see the Uli or the Chospes River. And so when he was probably just doing his thing, just, meditating on the Lord, on the scriptures or something, all right, whatever he was doing, he looked up and then all of a sudden he was seeing this vision in real time, right? So it says, and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns. And the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. All right. And it's going to break all these things down later. It says, I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him. Neither was there any that could deliver it out of his hand, but he did according to his will and became great. And I was considering, behold, an he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. And he came to the ram that had 2 horns. All right, so the second ram came to the first ram, which had the 2 horns. Right, one was bigger, one was smaller. Okay, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power. And I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler or choler, all right, meaning what? Just a burning, fiery, hot anger, right? Marar, right? Which that goes into the word bitter, right? To be bitter, to show bitterness. So extremely bitter anger towards the other ram, right? So, and there's history behind that. So it says, and brake his 2 horns, and there was no power in the ram to stand before him. But he cast him down to the ground and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. Verse 8 says, therefore the he-goat, waxed very great, and he was strong. The great horn was broken, and for it came up four notable ones toward the four winds of heaven. So this is the excuse me. This is a vision that Daniel saw standing probably on the balcony of the winter palace in Shushan, all right, or Susa or Shawashan, whichever you please. And he looked up over the Uli or the Chospes and saw this vision. So that's what he saw there. All right, two rams duking it out. Okay, and the one ram, beat down the other ram. Okay, so it says the little horn. All right, Daniel 8 and 9. So it says, and out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great toward the south and toward the east and toward the pleasant land. So what's the pleasant land? The pleasant land is, our territory, but beginning at Jerusalem, okay? Because Jerusalem is our headquarters. So that's the pleasant land. It's talking about our lands, our territory, our area. And it waxed great, even to the host of heaven. And it cast down some of the hosts and of the stars to the ground and stamped upon them, which that's one of the examples that goes to show you that, stars are not always talking about the stars up in space, but sometimes the stars are referring to the children of Israel. There's another example, all right, in Daniel, sorry, not Daniel, Revelation, the 12th chapter, at the top of that chapter, I believe it's like in verse 1 or 2. And then there's another one that Joseph had, all right, where he had a dream, okay? So it says, and it waxed great even to the host of heaven. So the host of heaven are talking about what? The Israelites, right? And it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground and stamped upon them. Yeah, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host. All right. To the talk about the priest, right? It says, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. All right. So it says, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Now I probably should have went to the other things first. As a matter of fact, well, let's just keep reading. It'll be okay because it's going to interpret it, and we'll get into it then. So it says, and host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto the certain saint which spake, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice? So this is another example of showing you that the angels are also known as saints because they are our brothers of the heavenly realm. The other example is in Deuteronomy 33, the one that I know of anyways, all right, where he calls them saints, all right, the angels, that is. All right, so it says, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot? And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Okay. So he goes on to say the interpretation of the dream, of the vision. So Daniel 8 and 15, it says, and it came to pass when even I, Daniel, had seen the vision and sought for the meaning, then behold, there stood before me as the appearance of a man. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of Uli, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. So this one voice told Gabriel, the archangel, all right, to make known the understanding of the vision to Daniel. All right. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell upon my face. But he said unto me, understand, O son of man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. So at the time of the end shall be the vision. Okay. So let's keep reading into it. So it says, now as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep on my face toward the ground. But he touched me and set me upright. And he said, behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation, for at the time appointed, the end shall be. All right. So it says the ram's identity. Daniel 8 and 20. The ram which thou sawest having two horns are the kings of Media and Persia. Okay. Now you understand why we read about that history in the opening. All right. And the transfer of power from from the Medes to the Persians, then from the Persians, to the Greeks. All right. because we read that in Daniel 7, okay, verse 5 and 6, all right? So it says, the ram which thou sawest having two horns. So the first ram that he saw says there was one horn that was smaller than the other. That smaller horn was the Medes or Media, all right? The larger horn was the Persians. The same thing as you read in Daniel chapter 7. The bear that lifted itself up on one side. The Medes were in power, and then the Persians were lifted up into power. It became known as the Persian Empire. So that's what's going on there. That smaller horn is representing the Media or the Medes or whatever empire, and the larger horn of that same ram is representing the Persians. Okay, so it says the goat. All right, so it says Daniel 8 and 21, and the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. Now I wasn't intending, but it's actually good for you to know this and for me to bring it out right now, so I'll just do it anyways. So First Maccabees chapter 1, this will be swift. Okay, so First Maccabees chapter 1, all right, verse 1. And it happened after that Alexander, son of Philip. All right, so Alexander is the one, you know, in the history they call Alexander the Great. I just call him Alexander the Greek. All right, but he's the Alexander the Third. All right, the son of Philip. This is Philip the Second of Macedon, or the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Chittim, which is an island. All right, had smitten Darius, which this Darius is Darius the Third, all right, king of the Persians and Medes, that he reigned in his stead, the first over Greece. Now, real quick, let me go up here and we'll punch up Darius, and let's see if we can get here it is, Darius the Third. Darius the Third was the 13th and last Achaemenid king of kings of Persia, reigning from 336 BC to his death in 330. Yep, because around 333, the Greeks started making more noise, all right? Probably a little bit before that even, but definitely around 333 moving forward, Greeks started making a lot more noise. So it says, reigning from 336 BC to his death in 330 BC, contrary to his predecessor, Artaxerxes the fourth Arces, goes to show you that, once again, the main characters are mentioned, all right? The main kings, I should say. But there's other kings that came up at different times, right? It wasn't just, you know, back to back these particular guys, all right? So it says Darius was a distant member of the Achaemenid dynasty. Let me see what else is here. Anything that we might need to read. I don't know. I don't think so. What does it say? In 334 BC, Alexander the Great began his invasion of the Persian Empire and subsequently defeated the Persians in several battles before looting and destroying the capital, Persepolis, by fire in 330 BC, with the Persian Empire now effectively under Alexander's control. Alexander then decided to pursue Darius before Alexander reached him. However, Darius was killed by his relative Bessus, who was also the satrap of Bactria. That's what I was about to talk about, all right? What I was mentioning, all right, there's history behind why when it says he moved with Choler or Kohler, all right? So they were having letters sent back and forth to one another, and you know, Darius the Third really wanted to make peace and have kind of, you know, hash it out type of thing. But Alexander the Third, he wanted everything, all right? He wanted to conquer all the territories and Hellenize everybody, okay? Which he never actually got to see that happen. The Hellenization really happened more so under that Seleucid Empire, all right? But yeah, he wanted to Hellenize all the territories he conquered. So there were letters that were sent back forth, and Alexander wasn't having it within those letters. He's like, nah, I want to take over. Okay, so he pissed him off, and so he was like, yeah, I'm about to go get this dude. And so Darius the Third, he just wouldn't give up, all right? He kept fighting, all right? Give him that much. He kept fighting. He wouldn't give up. But what ultimately happened is his men, all right, as we just read here, before Alexander reached him, however, Darius was killed by his relative Bessus, who was also the satrap of Bactria. So Bessus being that ringleader, all right, and you know his men put him to death because they saw like, I mean, we're losing, all right, like let's just give in, okay. But he didn't want to give. He didn't want to give up, all right. So they put him to death, and as as Alexander continued, you know, doing his conquering, he eventually came over to find that Darius the Third was already dead. So Alexander didn't actually put him to death himself or conquer him himself. His own men, you know, did the do. Okay, but it's because they were pretty much fighting a losing battle, man. Okay, So yeah, so you have that history there. All right, and that was in a nutshell. So we didn't have to even talk about a whole lot of stuff there. All right, so beautiful. So let's go back and finish reading this. So it says about Alexander the Third. So it says, and a matter of fact, since we're here, real quick, Alexander the Great, there he is right there. Okay. Alexander the Third of Macedon, most commonly known as Alexander the Great, was a king of the ancient Greek kingdom, all right, of Macedon. He succeeded his father Philip II to the throne in 336 BC at the age of 20 and spent most of his ruling years conducting a lengthy military campaign throughout Western Asia, Central Asia, and parts of South Asia and Egypt, which is what we're about to read, all right, where it says by the age of 30, because I believe it was 12 years that it took him to conquer all those territories because the Lord was really moving him to do that. And after that, the Lord took him out the way. All right, he had created one of the largest empires in history, stretching from Greece to northwestern India. He was undefeated in battle and is widely considered to be one of history's greatest and most successful military commanders. Why is that, though? Because the Lord paved those battles for him, right? Not because he was special, all right? The Lord had prophecy moving, okay? There was a reason why he wanted them to do that, all right? I was going to read something else, but we really got what we needed there. So let's go on back. So it says, and made many wars, all right? It says, and he reigned in his stead, all right? The first over Greece. Darius, king of the Persians and Medes, all right? Which Darius the third, okay? So it says, because remember, the last Darius of the Median Empire, we already read about, all right? This Darius the third, this Darius is a different Darius. This is Darius the third, and this was around the time of the Persian rule, okay? If I'm correct, I said that right. It says that he reigned instead the first over Greece and made many wars and won many strongholds and slew the kings of the earth. All right. And Lord, will you be edified by this lesson? So it said, went through to the ends of the earth and took spoils of many nations, insomuch that the earth was quiet before him, whereupon he was exalted and his heart was lifted up. And he gathered a mighty strong host and ruled over countries and nations and kings and became tributaries unto him. Well, that's that conquering we talked about, right? It says, and after these things he fell sick and perceived that he should die. Wherefore he called his servants, such as were honorable and had been brought up with him from his youth, and parted his kingdom among them while he was yet alive. That's those 4 heads and that 4 wings, right? We also read in the last session in Daniel chapter 11, right? Where it says his reign was not to his posterity, all right? Because his generals took over, which was by war of the Diadoches, but ultimately, in a nutshell, his generals took over. It split up his territories, and there's that right there in verse 7. So Alexander reigned 12 years and then died, all right? And his servants, being those generals, all right, bear rule everyone in his place. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves. So did their sons after them many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth. And these were Edomites, man, okay? It says, and that main one says, and there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, or Epimanes as I call him, all right, which means madman. That's what our people call them. That's what I call him, Epimanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been in hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. All right. So there you have that, pretty much that back history there. All right, surrounding those matters. All right. What happened? I can't even click my I just have to pull it back up. I mean, let me click my box for my as a matter of fact, let me grab that blue letter back. This thing tripping this morning. Okay. So let's go back to Daniel 8. Let me find what scripture we're on. Okay, so we read the little horn. Okay, the interpretation. Yeah, we were down here. So, yep. So the goat, it says, and the rough goat is the king of Grecia. All right, so let's talk about Alexander the Third, or as history calls him, Alexander the Great. All right, I just call him Alexander the Greek, or I just call him Alexander the Third. All right, you don't never hear me put no respect on these heathen names. And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. Okay, so remember he says it had a notable horn. All right, so that transition of power from his father Philip II of Macedon to him. All right, so it says now that being broken, whereas 4 stood up for it. Now that's the same history read in Daniel chapter 7. Also what we just read in the other back history, fleshing it out a little more. All right, or give you more history surrounding those matters. But all goes together. First Maccabees chapter 1 and Daniel chapter 7, verse 6. all right, where it talks about the four heads and the four wings of a fowl, okay? And that's going into that war of the Diadoches, where his generals fought for power, okay? And his territories, pretty much talking about Alexander's territories, pretty much got split up between his generals, all right? So whereas four stood up for it, it says, which those four were Cassander, Lysimachus, Ptolemy, and Seleucus. But you also have to mention Antigonus because he was one of those major generals that fought for power, but they gained up on it to take him out. But so minus Antigonus, those are the four main ones. And that's the four it's talking about here. Okay. So that now being broken, whereas four stood up, those are those four. All right. Lysimachus, Ptolemy, Seleucus, and Cassander. It says, stood up for it. Four kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power. But not in whose power? Not in Alexander, as we read in what? Chapter 11. Not to his posterity. Okay? So you follow along? So verse 23 says, and in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. That's going into the Seleucid Empire, in particular Antiochus IV Epimanes, who we just read about in First Maccabees chapter 1. Okay? So it says, and his power, and when you could read more in that chapter to see the hell that he put on us Israelites, man. And that's where the heavy Hellenization came through him. All right, beginning with him. It says, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power, and he shall destroy wonderfully and shall prosper and practice and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. Right? It says, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. He shall destroy wonderfully and shall prosper and practice and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. So the mighty and the holy people are talking about us. All right. And we know, as in all empires, all right, that come into power, it's the Lord that sets things up. All right. He says, man, where's that? See if I can find it real quick. I think it's Psalm 75. If I'm correct, that's the one. Yep. Psalm 75:6, the water Yahweh Shah. For promotion cometh neither from the east, nor from the west, nor from the south, but the Most High is the judge. He put it down one and set it up another. All right. So transition of power comes from the Lord. Okay. So even Seleucid or Antiochus, all right, he only did what he was able to do by the will of the Lord. All right, playing out prophecy. Okay. Let me get this off. So it says, and through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, meaning his mind. All right, lifted up in pride. Okay, and there eventually, when you go back to Maccabees, the first chapter, I love going to that chapter, man. He eventually sent out a decree, all right, that everybody should, be as one people, all right, and follow, one thing in one order. So basically, in referring to us, not saying it was just only for us, but referring to us, all right, it's a shutdown what we had going on, all right. Our way of worship and things that we do, all right, to shut that down and follow the ways of them, okay? And that's where the line was drawn, okay? Beginning with Mattathias, all right? He was like, hell no, we're not doing this, man. You see what this is going, this wicked sacrifice on all this kind of stuff. You got Israelites, flip-flopping to the other side, to the dark side, all right? Like Palpatine, do not underestimate the power of the dark side, you Jedi. That's what was happening back then. You had the Israelites jumping over, dealing with the Greeks, and forsaking the Holy Covenant. That's all in that first chapter. But then you had real men, real Israelite men who stood up and would rather die than to eat swine or allow this to go on. The temple is defiled and all these different things. All right, these heathens are not just going to blaspheme the Lord and think they're going to get away with it. We're not with it. So that's where you had the separation there in the New Testament. Those that forsook the Holy Covenant became their descendants became those known as the uncircumcision or Gentiles, and those that stuck to the covenant through the Hasmonean dynasty became the ones of the Jews of Judea known as the circumcision. So you have to understand that history in order to get that mystery in the New Testament. Let's keep reading. And through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself. And that's a natural thing for Esau to do. Come with loving, peaceable words, because it says that he came with peaceable words. Comes with peaceable words, and then he puts a whole knife in your back. Okay, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of. Yeah, he killed innocents, men, women, children, babies. He didn't care if you were doing our thing. All right, he was gonna find you and put you to death, man. All right. It says, and it talks about that. Like when you go into Maccabees, there's more history on that, man. All right, about putting people to death. It says, and he shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. So it says, and the vision of the evening and the morning, which was told is true. Wherefore it shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days. And I, Daniel, fainted and was sick certain days. Afterward I rose up and did the king's business, and I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it. Now, I just did a brief, summary of this chapter, what it's going into, okay? But we'll definitely, as the Spirit allows, I'm going to come back and we'll actually go into, certain things that were said here and bring up more history in First Maccabees, the first chapter, to give you more understanding of what was going on here. Because the things we read from the Wikipedia, explain the Medes and the Persians and things of that nature. But this chapter started to transition to the Greeks, beginning with Alexander III, all right, and all those things. And then eventually, one of those generals that came up, which was Seleucus, founding the Seleucid Empire. From the Seleucid Empire came out Antiochus IV Epimanes, okay, and then you get that history in the First Maccabees, the first chapter. So, as the Spirit allows, we go into that next time. So it'll be the little plus lesson, all right? So you can get more background history on that to really get more understanding to everything that was happening here, all right? But basically, to summarize, you had Darius the Third, all right, who's at this time, the Persian Empire was in power, okay, and you had Alexander the Third, okay, and those were wars that were fought. Matter of fact, we mentioned it last time. 300 movie was showing you these things, all right. The Greeks unified together to fight against the Persian Empire, and that last one being Xerxes the Third. I think it was Xerxes the Third. No, I think he was Xerxes the First. Xerxes the First, if I'm correct. But we'll get to that later. All right. I believe that comes up again in one of the next two chapters, I believe. All right. I believe it's like in chapter 10 or 11. But anyways, that was pretty much there because history is so vast. So I want to try to keep it as simple as possible, give you just the simple understanding, the basic understanding. Like I said the last time, you'll build layers, more and more layers. All right. As long as you have the basic understanding, you'll be pointing in the right direction. You can build more layers on top of it. All right. So we'll leave it at that. No need to force it. Lord willing, you edified. Till next time, Yahshua, I'm going to say shalom.